Welcome to the Scenario Podcast, your guide to mental health and well-being. Each episode, we uncover practical tools, discuss expert insights, and explore how supplements can transform your mental health journey. Get ready to learn, grow, and thrive with us.
We live in a world that really demands peak performance, like every second of the day, doesn't it? I mean, whether you're staring down a huge exam or, tackling complex projects at work, or even just managing the sheer volume of information coming at you, keeping that mental sharpness is just crucial. So it's completely understandable that a lot of us are looking towards, nature for maybe a bit of an edge. And today, we are diving deep into what you might call the reigning superstar of cognitive supplements, Ginkgo Biloba extract. It's a name practically everyone knows, right? But our mission today is to really cut through maybe centuries of hype. We want to quickly arm you, the listener, with the precise scientific knowledge, the really necessary safety warnings, and the exact quality markers you need, so you can make a genuinely informed decision about whether using it is right for you.
That's exactly right. Ginkgo biloba actually comes from one of the oldest living tree species on the planet. I mean, it's a true ancient remedy used in traditional medicine for literally millennia. And today, it's still one of the most widely consumed herbal supplements around the globe, specifically for brain health. But, we aren't here to just rely on tradition, are we? We're going to look at what modern rigorous clinical trials are telling us about this supplement. Does it really deliver the goods, and under what specific conditions?
Okay, so we have to start right at the foundation then. The promise sounds great, but where does the power actually come from?
Yeah.
Is it really enough to just, crush up a bunch of dried leaves and stick them in a bottle? Or is there a specific effective form we absolutely must be looking for?
You've really hit on the most critical point straight away. You could be wasting your time and money if you just buy, say, dried leaf powder. The efficacy you see is entirely tied to a very specific form, and that is the standardized Ginkgo biloba extract. What's really fascinating here is that the chemistry of this particular extract has been refined over, decades of research. We actually know pretty precisely which compounds are doing the heavy lifting. So you absolutely must look for a product that's standardized to guarantee the presence of two key active groups, flavone glycosides and terpene lactones.
Okay, flavone glycosides and terpene lactones. Let's put a pin in that for a sec. If standardization is the absolute key, what should the label actually say? What are we looking for?
Right. The measurable standard for a high-quality product is, it's pretty much non-negotiable. The label must explicitly guarantee 24% flavone glycosides and 6% terpene lactones. If those specific percentages aren't there, honestly, you're probably looking at a low-quality or, frankly, inactive product. Ah, okay. So if the label just vaguely says ginkgo leaf powder or maybe extract blend, we're essentially buying filler, something that might not do much.
Precisely. Yeah, filler is a good word.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a practical danger to buying unstandardized supplements, too. The raw leaves contain something called ginkgolic acids.
Ginkgolic acids sounds not great.
No, they're not. They can cause quite severe allergic reactions in some people and are generally undesirable. Good standardization, like that 246 standard we just mentioned, involves processing that specifically removes these potentially harmful ginkgolic acids, so it guarantees both potency and safety. This is really the difference between, say, an old folk remedy and a reliable modern supplement.
Okay, that completely shifts the conversation, doesn't it? From just, does ginkgo work, to, is the ginkgo I bought actually high quality? But let's assume we've got that high quality standardized extract. What happens next? Let's unpack the mechanisms. How is this extract supposed to actually improve cognitive function once it's, in my system? Research points to two primary ways GBB seems to work. They're interconnected, and neither is magic. They're physiological. First, it acts as a kind of vasoregulator. It supports better blood flow to the brain. And we're not talking just a tiny boost. This improves the delivery of oxygen and glucose, which are the brain's main fuel sources, to your neural tissue. The second mechanism involves powerful antioxidant activity. Ginkgo helps protect nerve cells from oxidative damage. You can sort of think of it as providing armor for your neurons. So when we combine better fueling and better protection, we're creating a much more robust environment for cognitive processing overall.
Wait a second. If the main mechanism is better circulation, better blood flow to the brain, couldn't I just, do some high-intensity cardio every morning and get the same core benefit? Why pay for a pill?
That's a really insightful question, actually, and it gets right to the heart of supplementation, doesn't it? You are absolutely right that cardio is hugely beneficial for circulation, no question. But GBB seems to act more locally, chemically. within the microcapillary system, those tiny blood vessels feeding the brain. It's thought to work synergistically. It complements the positive effects of exercise. So for someone already doing regular cardio, GBB might offer an extra layer of protection and perhaps improved microcirculation that exercise alone can't fully replicate, especially targeting those protective antioxidant benefits we mentioned.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's like targeted chemical sport, complementing the physical activity. So for the person taking it for, let's say, daily cognitive support, maybe a student cramming for exams or someone dealing with that afternoon mental fatigue at work, what are the key tangible benefits they usually report experiencing?
Right. The reported benefits tend to fall into about three main buckets. General improvements often include just overall better memory and concentration, and sometimes a noticeable reduction in that sort of mid-afternoon brain fog, what we call mental fatigue. More specifically, people often cite improvements in short-term memory recall, sharper focus and alertness, and quite often a lift in their overall mental energy and mood. Now, this is where we absolutely have to introduce the critical nuance. We need to address the hype versus the reality. Because ginkgo is so ancient, it sometimes gets painted as this cure-all, And some clinical trials have investigated ginkgo's potential to maybe delay or slow the progression of cognitive decline in its early stages, including decline linked to serious conditions like Alzheimer's disease.
Right. So what's the verdict there? Are we looking at some kind of cognitive miracle drug?
No. Far from it, actually. This is exactly where the results become distinctly mixed. While some high-quality studies do show modest benefits, maybe in stabilization or slowing decline slightly, others show no statistically significant difference compared to a placebo.
Mixed results. Why is that? Why the difference?
Well, researchers point to several possible methodological issues. Sometimes the quality of the GBB used in the trial wasn't strictly that 246 standard we keep emphasizing. Sometimes studies maybe started testing too late in the disease progression to show an effect, and other times sample sizes or the dosages used varied quite wildly between studies. So the bottom line is, GBB is definitely not a cure for diseases like Alzheimer's. But there is some persistent hope that a high-quality, standardized extract used consistently might serve as a kind of protective aid. But the science is it's far from settled on large-scale disease treatment.
That's a really crucial distinction to make. It's more of an aid for daily mental sharpness, potentially a long-term protector, but we definitely need to manage expectations regarding serious medical conditions. Speaking of management, here's where things get really interesting for the listener. Safety. If someone thinks, okay, maybe I'll try this, after talking to their doctor, of course, what are the essential safety warnings they absolutely cannot ignore?
Safety is paramount, you're right, especially when we're discussing substances that impact circulation. Generally speaking, GBB is considered safe for most healthy adults when taken at the clinically supported dose range. Some mild, usually temporary, side effects can occur, mostly things like headaches, maybe some dizziness, or a mild upset stomach. If you experience a sudden, persistent headache, that might be a sign the dosage is too high for you, or perhaps the quality of the extract you bought isn't great. But the absolute non-negotiable critical warning is regarding medication interactions, because ginkgo affects platelet aggregation. Basically, it acts as a mild blood thinner itself. It can seriously interact with certain medications.
Okay, I know you're going to say blood thinners, but let's be really specific. Which ones are the main concern? And what's the worst case scenario if someone just ignores this and doesn't talk to their doctor first?
Yes, the primary concern is absolutely prescription blood thinners or anticoagulants, like warfarin is a common one. Combining GBB with these types of medications significantly increases the risk of bleeding or bruising, which can actually be quite dangerous. It can also potentially interact with AIDs, like ibuprofen, especially if taken in high doses over a long time, because it can amplify their antiplatelet effect too. The worst case scenario for someone ignoring this advice, potentially spontaneous serious bleeding events. You absolutely must treat GBB as a serious intervention, particularly if you are on any prescribed medication. Consultation is key.
That advice just feels non-negotiable. And honestly, based on what you see, how often do people maybe skip that step, skip talking to a doctor before starting something just because it's labeled natural?
Unfortunately, far too often. There's this sort of dangerous perception out there that because something is natural, it must be automatically safe. But as we've just discussed, anything potent enough to potentially help your brain is also potent enough to interfere with pharmaceuticals. We really implore you, the listener, to treat that consultation with your healthcare provider as essential Truly not optional for your own safety.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's assume the listener has consulted their healthcare provider. They've gotten the green light. Now they face the chaos of the supplement aisle. How can they possibly cut through all that noise and ensure they buy a high-quality, effective product that actually meets those standards we've been talking about?
Right. This is probably the most crucial takeaway for practical application. We absolutely must focus on those measurable standards. We essentially developed a 4-point checklist that should help eliminate, I'd guess, 90% of the ineffective products instantly. Number 1, we have to reiterate the standardized extract rule. Look for that specific 246 guarantee 24% flavone glycosides and 6% terpene lactones. If it doesn't say that clearly, it indicates an unproven or likely weaker product.
And just to tie back to the chemistry again, why is that specific ratio, 24:6, so important? Why not 20:8 or something else?
Yeah, good question. It's basically the ratio that was discovered and used through the most successful long-term clinical trials. The thinking is that the flavone glycosides handle the bulk of the antioxidant work, protecting the nerves, while the terpene lactones seem strongly linked to those microcirculatory improvements. You really need both components working together in that research proportion to get the intended cognitive benefit. Okay, number 2 on the checklist is dosage consistency. Look for products offering doses within the clinically supported range, which is generally 120 milligrams to 240 milligrams daily. And it's typically recommended to split this dose, maybe take half in the morning and half in the early afternoon, just for a more sustained effect throughout the day. Third is what I consider the gold standard for all supplements: third-party testing. If a brand isn't willing to submit its product for independent analysis by an outside lab, well, you should probably be skeptical. This testing ensures the product actually contains what the label promises. That's potency, and critically, it verifies purity. It checks for contaminants like heavy metals, pesticides, and yes, those unwanted ginkgolic acids we talked about earlier. And finally, number 4, clean ingredients. Always check the other ingredients list on the label. You really want to avoid products with unnecessary fillers, synthetic additives, artificial dyes, or anything else that just compromises the purity of the active extract. The cleaner the formula, generally, the better.
That is an exceptionally clear and actionable checklist. Thank you. And just for listeners maybe looking for trusted starting points, our sources did identify 2 specific brands that seem to consistently meet these quite stringent quality criteria: NW Food Ginkgo Biloba and Nature's Bounty Ginkgo Biloba. Apparently, they adhere to the 246 standardization and are generally well regarded for their testing protocols. So those might be names to look out for. Okay, let's pivot slightly. Now that we understand the product itself really well, we know GBB works primarily on circulation and protection. But what if the listener's unique challenge isn't really about blood flow? What if it's, say, pure stress or anxiety or maybe poor sleep that's causing their cognitive lag? What happens if Ginkgo Biloba just doesn't quite fit their specific profile?
That's exactly the logical conclusion stemming from those mixed clinical results we talked about earlier. If the primary mechanism of GBB, which is circulation and antioxidant protection, doesn't directly align with the root cause of your cognitive issue, well, then it probably won't work optimally for you. And this realization is really driving the shift towards more personalized supplement platforms. We saw mentions of one called Scenario in the sources, for example. The basic idea is pretty simple. Instead of just guessing which supplement might help, these platforms require a more comprehensive assessment up front. They often use a detailed quiz approach covering core wellness areas like your focus, your energy levels, the quality of your sleep, and your stress resilience.
And the output from that quiz, I'm guessing, is a recommendation that targets the cause of the cognitive issue, not just the symptom.
Exactly. That's the goal. If the assessment indicates, for instance, that your primary issue is high stress and maybe elevated cortisol causing memory lapses, they might actually skip GBB entirely. Why? Because direct stress modulation isn't Ginkgo's strongest suit. Instead, they might recommend alternative brain boosters that are specifically tailored to stress adaptation.
Okay, let's talk about those alternatives then. If GBB is mainly for circulation and protection, what are some of these other specialized tools that might be recommended instead for common cognitive roadblocks like stress or learning?
Yeah, we've seen 3 major alternatives pop up quite frequently in these personalization models. If stress adaptation seems to be the key issue, you might be guided towards something like rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola is what's known as an adaptogen, specifically used to help the body better manage both physical and mental stress and the fatigue that comes with it. Now, if the assessment points more towards a need for nerve support, maybe building new neural pathways, the recommendation might shift towards lion's mane mushroom. Lion's mane is gaining a lot of traction for its potential to support something called nerve growth factor, or NGF.
Nerve growth factor.
Yeah.
Sounds important.
It is, for brain plasticity and health. And finally, if the specific challenge is more around learning speed and memory retention, that ability to really grab onto and hold new information, you might be directed toward Bacopa monnieri. Bacopa has a long history of use and strong associations with enhancing those specific learning and recall functions. It really shows that achieving optimal cognitive health often requires finding the right specialized tool for the right job. It's not always a one-size-fits-all approach with a single supplement.
That brings us perfectly towards our wrap-up. So the bottom line seems to be, Ginkgo Biloba extract, provided it meets that critical 246 standardization, is a solid natural option backed by pretty strong evidence for improving daily memory and focus, mainly by boosting circulation and protection. But quality control and potentially personalization are absolutely key. Now, we always get one major FAQ with supplements like this. How long does this process actually take? When can you expect results?
Yes, setting expectations here is vital because GBB works by supporting physical changes like better circulation and nerve protection. It's definitely not instantaneous like, say, caffeine. You should realistically expect to commit to 4 to 6 weeks of consistent daily use before you might start noticing genuine, sustained improvements in your memory and focus. Patience is absolutely required here.
4 to 6 weeks, that's a great piece of actionable information for people to leave with. Thanks.
So we've established today that the effectiveness of GBB really relies heavily on your individual biology and, crucially, on the quality of the product you choose, particularly that adherence to the 246 standardization. We also noted that clinical research, although it's mixed, continues to investigate GBB for its potential role in maybe offering some long-term protection against cognitive decline. And this all raises, I think, an important question for you, the learner, to consider as you move forward. Since GBB is really just one component within a larger, more specialized toolkit, alongside other things we mentioned like rhodiola, lion's mane, maybe bacopa, how should your focus perhaps shift? Should it shift from merely verifying the quality of a single standardized product like Ginkgo towards more actively cultivating and maintaining a personalized, tailored regimen, especially when you're addressing long-term goals like maintaining peak cognitive health for the rest of your life? The real challenge maybe isn't finding that one magic pill, but rather building an optimized, personalized strategy over time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Scenario Podcast. Don't forget to visit scenario.com for more expert tips, articles, and supplements designed to support your mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time, take care of yourself.